Hello, and welcome to Lasting Legends. Today we will be learning how the women in our history have influenced us, which is saying a lot considering how the patriarchy has always downplayed women. You've probably already heard of some historically significant figures like Catherine the Great and Theodora. They ruled massive empires and therefore held massive power, but we are going to look at women who made permanent legacies on our world today.
Malala Yousafzai was born on July 12, 1997, in the city of Mingora, located in the Swat Valley, Pakistan. Her father was a part of a learning institution in Mingora. In 2007, the Taliban began taking control over the valley and banning girls from attending school. By the end of 2008, the Taliban had destroyed around 400 schools. That same year, Malala started a blog on the Urdu language site on the BBC under the name Gal Makai, titled I'm Afraid. In her blog, Malala talked about her life in the Swat Valley under control of the Taliban, and her desire to go to school, her fears about the situation, and her opposition towards the Taliban. In 2009, Malala and her family were forced to leave their home and travel hundreds of miles to find safety. When she later returned to her home in Mingora, Malala continued to campaign for her right to go to school. In 2011, Malala was nominated for the International Children's Peace Prize and awarded Pakistan's National Peace Prize. But her life was about to change dramatically. On October 9, 2012, Malala was tracked down by the Taliban and shot 3 times in the head on a school bus she was riding. She was airlifted to a Pakistani military hospital in Peshawar and taken to an intensive care unit 4 days later in Birmingham, England. On July 12, 2013, Malala spoke at the United Nations in New York. Later that year, she published her first book, an autobiography titled I Am Malala, the girl who stood up for education and was shot by the Taliban. In October 2013, the European Parliament awarded her the Sakharov Prize for Freedom and Thought. Through creating the Malala Fund with her father, Malala traveled to Jordan to meet Syrian refugees, Kenya to meet young female students, and finally to northern Nigeria, speaking up about girls who were kidnapped by Boko Haram, a terrorist group which also prevented girls from attending school. In October 2013, Malala Kadish Sethari, an Indian children's rights activist, was named a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and is the youngest person to receive the award. The Malala Fund today has become an organization that empowers girls through education. It also funds education projects in 6 countries, works with international leaders by investing in innovative solutions with local partners, and globally advocates for quality secondary education for all girls. Today, Malala is living in Birmingham and remains an active advocate for education and change. Malala's story has reached many people and is still inspiring girls today.
Born on November 7, 1867, as the youngest of 5 children, Marie Curie was the child of 2 teachers, her father specializing in math and physics. She had a bright mind from the start, excelling in Polish school as a top student and supporting her sister as they both tried to study abroad. For 5 years, Curie worked as a tutor and governess while attending Warsaw's Floating University, a series of underground, informal classes held due to the University of Warsaw's men-only policy. In 1891, she finally enrolled at the Sorbonne in Paris, but suffered from health problems like malnutrition because she was so poor at the time. Curie pushed through to receive master's degrees in physics in 1893 and mathematics in 1894. Curie met French physicist Pierre Curie while in search of a lab, marrying him a year later and afterwards giving birth to 2 daughters. She experimented with uranium rays and was the first scientist to coin the term radioactivity, thus creating the field of atomic physics. In 1898, Pierre and Curie discovered the radioactive elements polonium and radium. The Curies later won Nobel Prizes for their work in radioactivity, gaining international fame. Marie was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, but she did not stop her research. After the death of her husband in 1906, Curie took his position at the Sorbonne as the institution's first female professor. In 1911, she won yet another Nobel Prize in chemistry for the discovery of polonium and radium, achieving stardom as the first scientist to win 2 Nobel Prizes. As such a notable figure, Curie became a permanent member of the Solvay Congress in Physics, attending the first meeting with both Einstein and Planck. Despite her many lifetime accomplishments, Marie's experiments exposed her to radiation for over 20 years. She died on July 4, 1934, from aplastic anemia. She broke through numerous gender barriers through science and remains the only woman with Nobel Prizes in 2 different fields and the only person to win in multiple sciences. Many institutes have been named after the Curies, and Marie herself established a Radium Research Institute in Warsaw before her death. Her daughter, Irene Joliot Curie, carried on her work, winning a Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1935 for synthesis of new radioactive elements. Marie Curie herself left behind a powerful legacy based on science. Wu Zetian, also known as Wu Zhao and Wu Zhou, was the first and only female emperor. She lived from 624 to 705 CE, ruling from 690 to 705 CE during Tang Dynasty China. Being born into a wealthy family in Shanxi province, Wu Zhou had the opportunity to receive an education, which her father encouraged her to do. Unlike most girls, Wu Zhou could read, write, play music, and think intellectually, a crucial element to her later rise in power. At the age of 14, Wu Zhou was sent to the palace as a concubine to Emperor Taizong, who named her Mei Niang, beautiful girl. After his death, she married his son, Emperor Gaozong, and started to rule from behind the scenes. Gaozong fell to illness in the last 23 years of his life, allowing Wu Zhou to gain more power and eventually depose her own son from the throne. Wu Zhou quickly instigated change, exiling or executing anyone she considered an opponent. But however murderous she may have been, there was no doubt that Wu Zhou was an efficient and highly respected ruler. From 655 to 675 CE, she promoted military campaigns to conquer Korea. After renaming herself Wu Zetian, creating her own mini Zhou dynasty, and declaring herself an incarnation of the divine Buddha, all in 690 CE, she set out to reform both the state and education. Wu Zetian transformed China's militant aristocratic government into one promoted by scholar bureaucrats from the gentry class. As for the army, she created military exams for commanders and organized her own secret espionage and police forces. She established new systems of taxation, irrigation, and record-keeping, even adding on new written symbols called Zetian characters. Wu Zetian challenged Confucianist patriarchy by reopening Silk Road trade and spreading Buddhism throughout China. Many of her construction projects included Buddhist temples and monuments like the Longmen ghettos. Unfortunately, in threatening so many traditional Chinese and patriarchal values, enemies within the court spread rumors calling for her dismissal. As a result, Wu Zetian became even more paranoid, executing more and more people. The only female emperor of China was pressured to abdicate the throne in 705 CE, dying soon after. Today, Wu Zetian's text and literature provide an important outlook on Tang Dynasty China. The Longmen grottos she built remain a popular tourist attraction, and it is said that the face of the largest Buddhist statue is based off of the female emperor's own face. Wu Zetian lives on in the modern era as the subject of books, art, films, and television shows.
Eleanor Roosevelt was the wife of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Born on October 11, 1884, she grew up in a wealthy family as the niece of the 26th U.S. President, Theodore Roosevelt, but suffered through the death of both her parents and her brother at a young age. Eleanor enrolled at Allenswood, a girls' boarding school outside of London, where she came upon her natural intellectual curiosity and taste for adventure. Eleanor soon returned to New York, where she married Franklin Roosevelt on March 17, 1905. As her husband rose to power in politics, Eleanor too carried out the duties of an official wife, while also doing volunteer work for Red Cross and the military. In 1918, Franklin was caught having an affair with his secretary, and then in politics, the Roosevelts agreed not to divorce, but their relationship became more distant. In 1921, Franklin was afflicted with polio, and so Eleanor decided to help her husband's career by delving into politics herself. She identified with the Democratic Party, joined both the Women's Trade Union League and the Daughters of America Revolution. Eleanor became a major promoter of women's rights, minorities, civil rights, and community service. In addition, she was appointed a delegate at the United Nations in 1945. But perhaps her most important contribution was her role as an architect of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Eleanor Roosevelt died on November 7, 1962, but not before traveling the globe and meeting international leaders to advocate for human rights. Her work is a prime example of modernization in the 20th century, and she has set a precedent for equal rights movements.
Mary Wollstonecraft was an Anglo-Irish feminist, writer, scholar, philosopher, women's rights activist, educator, and journalist. She was born on April 27, 1759 in London, England. Although she received a poor education, Mary established a school in Newington Green with her best friend Fanny. Mary later wrote Thoughts on the Education of Daughters in 1787 from the observations she made during her time teaching. Within 5 years of publishing this, she wrote her most famous book, A Vindication of the Rights of Women in 1792, in which she advocated for the education reforms and giving women access to the same education opportunities as men. Make women rational creatures and free citizens, and they will quickly become good wives. That is, if men do not neglect the duties of husbands and fathers. Because the Enlightenment brought an era of logic and reason to Europe, she advocated for education reforms for women. Mary Wollstonecraft went on to challenge various social norms through her views on class, race, and gender. Unfortunately, she later died on September 10, 1979, just days after giving birth to her second child, Mary. Mary Jr. later went on to write Frankenstein, continuing her mother's legacy. In the modern era, Mary Wollstonecraft is considered a contributor to the first wave feminism. Her works were used in the 20th century women's suffrage movement and influenced major figures like Susan B. Anthony. Not only did she question traditional patriarchy in her lifetime and write a substantial amount of text, she laid groundwork for future feminism. In 2011, Mary Wollstonecraft's image was projected in the Palace of Westminster to raise support for building a permanent statue there, proof that her contributions to society have not been forgotten.
Joan of Arc, English for Jeanne d'Arc, was born in 1412 to Jacques d'Arc and Isabelle Romée in Dormy, France. She was never taught to read or write, but believed wholeheartedly in the Catholic Church. In 1415, France was invaded by King Henry V of England, and in 1420, the Treaty of Troyes was signed by Charles VI of France, which granted King Henry V the throne after King Charles died. However, they both died in 1422, passing the French throne to King Charles VII, who at this time was only an infant. He was called Dauphin, or heir to the throne. It was around this time that Joan, at 12 years of age, started hallucinating and hearing voices. These visions encouraged her to plead for King Charles VII to rid France of the British threat. Later, she sought an audience with him. Charles was reluctant at first, but eventually let her join the army. She fought in numerous battles, successfully forcing the Anglo-Burgundians to retreat across the Loire River. On July 18, 1429, King Charles was crowned the King of France in Reims. In the spring of 1430, Joan was ordered to lead an assault against the Burgundians, during which she was unhorsed and captured. Convicted of heresy and put on trial, the 19-year-old was burned at the stake on May 30th, 1431. King Charles VII did nothing to negotiate her release. Joan of Arc's story is one of tragedy, but also one of accomplishment. She fought for women's rights through her military prowess and stayed true to her Catholic beliefs. As a result, her myth has inspired many modern books and films. In her short lifetime, Joan of Arc shaped a nation, making her a historical symbol of French nationalism. As for her delusions, many scientists now believe that she may have had something akin to schizophrenia. However, some think that she may have had bovine tuberculosis, which is caused by drinking unpasteurized milk and can lead to dementia and seizures. On the other hand, without her visions, Joan of Arc would never have made such a large impact on history.
This video was produced and directed by Austin Kazaya. Our script was written by our lovely team of historians, Ainsley Mitchell, Izzo Walata, Allison Zhang, and Austin Kazaya. Shout out to the Zhang family for setting up a film environment, Izzo Walata for providing tech equipment, Ainsley Mitchell for keeping an awesome boss atmosphere, and Austin Kazaya for staying up late to edit this.